Hello, everyone, and um, welcome to LA201. This is class number 3 for section 11, and I'm going to record some videos, kind of brief, to replace some of the classwork that we would have, excuse me, covered today. It is January 26th. And due to the college closing today, of course, we will not be holding class. So what I thought I would do is cover some information related to our reading, um, Ideal Democracy by Carl Becker. So as I said, I'll record a few short videos to replace some of the lecture. Unfortunately, we won't be able to replicate the class discussion that I had planned for today. But I'll give you enough information and pose a couple questions in Blackboard for you to think about, which I think will be helpful for you writing your first paper, which is due next week. So I'll talk more about that in another video later. For now, let's get started with Becker. Okay, so if you recall, I constantly get in this mode of, when thinking of critical reading, asking a few questions, as we did last week with the authors that we looked at, Madison and de Tocqueville. We're going to do the same with Becker this week. So we're going to ask, who was Carl Becker? Well, he lived a bit, more recent in history than Madison and de Tocqueville, in that he lived and was a United States citizen and lived from 1873 to 1945. So we know he was around probably when some of our parents, grandparents anyway, were alive. And we also know from the reading that he was a very influential historian. Okay? We also can think about what was going on at the time during when this piece was written, and this was written, Ideal Democracy was written as a lecture that was given, a series of 3 lectures. This was the first one, Ideal Democracy. So in Becker, what he's trying to do here is to lay out what he believes would be the ideal democracy. Okay, so 1940, when he gave this lecture, there are a couple of things that we can look at that were going on in the world. One is that democracy was, very much in jeopardy of being extinct, done away with the rise of a couple world leaders like Adolf Hitler and Mussolini in Italy. The totalitarian government and the Nazi state government were taking over the democracy, and the very essence of individual rights were going by the wayside. So Becker is writing from this perspective. That he believes that democracy at his time, when he gave this lecture, was in jeopardy of becoming extinct. It was going to go away. So that's where he's coming from with this writing. He's trying to lay out what he believes will help democracy survive. Okay, so a few points that I'll make, and I'll pause here so I can flip through my notes occasionally and hope it's not too disrupting to the lecture material. One of the key points that Becker does base his lecture and of course this writing on is his belief that that the American Revolution did not just happen so that the colonies could declare their independence, as we discussed with Madison last week. But he also believed that it was fundamentally about changing the structure of government as well. So there were 2 main components for the revolution, the reasons for the revolution. Again, independence was one of them, changing the structure of government was another. One of the most interesting points in the overview of Carl Becker that I want to point out here is that if you remember, I mentioned a minute ago that Carl Becker was a noted historian. He was a very well-known and admired historian at that. However, he believed that the study of history is not accurate. And this is the interesting point. Here we have one of the most noted historians of that time, and in 1940 he was making the proclamation that history is not an exact science. What does he mean by that? Well, in a sense, he means that, or he meant that history is based on people's accounts of events that happened. So, in short, people's biases, people's individual accounts of historical events played into the actual event itself, thereby making it not a scientific and factual study, uh, rather more of kind of a storytelling, if you will. And he does use that language in his writing, in his lecture as well. Okay. So here I'm going to read this from the book because I think this is a really important point here. Becker's intent in his book was to show how the philosophical roots of the American Revolution's determination to create a democracy were not only deep but also strong. Here's the key point. The essentially humanistic thought of the 18th century Enlightenment rejected the idea of a city of God. So I think we maybe have all heard that term. Um, or a heaven on earth, that kind of language. He rejected that, and he rejected it based on the the individual's rights, okay, and the use of reason to establish those individual rights. So he was against some sort of utopia, heaven on earth. He was more focused on how do we use reason to create a better life for each individual. Okay, that was his take on ideal democracy in general. So that's kind of the little overview I wanted to give of Becker. I'll end this video for now, and I'll post some more videos to kind of get into his work in a couple minutes. See you soon.